I want to introduce to you a gal by the name of Angel Cushing. Angel called me about, I don't know, 5 or 7 years ago. I was visiting with Tatum Lee, and we had a little conference call, and Angel was new to all of these property rights issues. She's got a great story, but what sticks in my mind about Angel is that she says, we've moved to Emporia, Kansas, and they're outlawing barbed wire. And it just struck me. And so her story started there. And if you'll remember, back in 2014, when there was a proposed national heritage area over southeast Colorado, Norm Kincaid, Barb and Zane Liniger, myself, Kimmy Lewis, we all worked hard in defeating this national heritage area in southeast Colorado. I think I was the one that introduced you to Norm or gave you his number. I don't know, maybe not. But Angel has taken these issues and really just started a parade of success from the Central Plains South. I know that I've told you guys many times, when they started on the APR, they were coming to South Dakota, and then they were going to come to the Sand Hills of Nebraska, the Flint Hills of Kansas, the Osage country, and that's what's happening. They're coming, and we have to defend these property rights. And so give a warm welcome to Angel Cushing. She's going to tell you her story, and you're going to really enjoy this. Come on up. Clicker if you need that. Thank you. All right.
They really did try to ban barbed wire fences in Lyon County. And sad to say, most of you probably have some kind of planning and zoning regulations attempting to go in that is doing the exact same thing. It's called FormBased Zoning. It's the new way to zone everything. So I'm going to get a little technical here for you. Most of the United States is Euclidean-based. So that is how it's used. Your industry park is zoned industry. Your housing is zoned residential. Now, a few years ago, if you were to put that in your internet search engine, it would tell you that Euclidean-based zoning is based off of a United States Supreme Court case in the town of Euclidia back in the 1920s. Now, if you look that up, it says that it is the heart of racism. And the only way to end racism is to put in form-based zoning. Now, a few years ago, if you looked up form-based zoning, it would tell you that that is zoning based on how things should look. That's a beautiful area over there. It should be a park. So it doesn't matter whether there's industry there or houses there or anything. Form-based zoning, if you look that up now, says it is the way to end racism. So we didn't know any of this. All we knew at the time is that a comprehensive plan had been passed, and we didn't know it. And regulations were about to go in that was going to ban barbed wire fences. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. This is actually a homeowners association on the entire county. So how this works, they combine the city and the county. They come in and they sweet talk your cities and your counties that they'll get a whole bunch of grant money. There's just one problem. You got too many amendments on your comprehensive planning and zoning, or maybe you don't have comprehensive planning and zoning at all and you need it, and we can help you out with that. We've got contractors. We'll help you set that up, and you just cross that off the box and you can get grant money. So they combine the city and the county, and the reason they do that is because the city is always going to have the majority. You're always going to be able to find planning and zoning board members and appeal boards members from the city easier than you can from the rural communities. So once these form-based zoning rules go into a place, they're locked in because the city's always going to vote for their best interest, and they will absolutely vote to camp on your pastures, fish out of your stock ponds. Absolutely. And that's what happened to us. They had a comprehensive plan that turned everything outside of the city of Emporia into a national park. And of course, banning barbed wire fences. We fought that back in electric fences, so no cows whatsoever. So we fought that back. And let me back up and say the significance. If you're not from Kansas, you may not know the significance of the Flint Hills. So for everybody outside of Kansas, I'm going to sum it up in your ratios. So your cow-calf pair, the average in the Flint Hills is 4 to 8 acres per cow-calf pair. This is really nutritious grass there. We grow fat cows and fat rocks. So they were going to ban this. So right next door to us in Chase County was Tallgrass National Prairie Preserve. Now, 34 acres of that is owned by the National Park Service. More than 10,000 acres are owned by the Nature Conservancy. So we fought that back, right? We still have form-based zoning. Form-based zoning, let me back up a little bit and explain that more, just so that you understand. Form-based zoning flips the burden of proof onto you. You, the landowner, now has to prove that you deserve an opportunity to go in front of your representatives or go in front of your zoning and appeals board. It also allows very vague regulations. So by saying it should look this way, that means it's based on fads, and those fads are determined by your zoning administrators, who are all trained by American Planning Association. I have found some communities that do have local folks doing that are not woke. The best way to tell whether or not your zoning administrator has gone down that path and who they're training is to go in and ask them one day what the procedures are for putting up a windmill, your own private windmill. They're going to be all for it. They're going to give you those regulations. Everything's going to be fine. Wait a few weeks or send somebody else in and ask, what were the regulations for a cell phone tower? If you notice a difference, you probably have a woke zoning administrator, right? Because windmill towers is going to encourage you to leave. Cell phone towers will encourage you to stay. And so they usually have two different opinions of that. So when you put these in place without anybody knowing about it, and you lock this into your city, and you flip that burden of proof onto your citizens, then you've locked these policies in place. And this is really important. This is not just something happening in Kansas near Emporia. We found this in several counties in Kansas. We found it in other states. My husband is retired military. Moving for us is so easy. Our first reaction is we're just going to move somewhere else and stay ahead of it. There was not one state in the nation that we could find that did not have this kind of program going in. So it's happening everywhere. Regulations are very, very important. So as we started trying to bring awareness to the banning of barbed wire fences, I got a phone call from a state representative in Kansas that you all know. Her name's Tatum Lee. I talked to her yesterday, by the way. She said she loves you, and you are her people, but she couldn't be here this convention. So I got a phone call from Tatum Lee, and she said, Angel, do you have a National Heritage Area over you? Because this seems to go around along with National Heritage Areas. I said, no, we don't have one. Oh, that's nuts. That's crazy. And I got to looking, and sure enough, our county tried to join a National Heritage Area. So a Natural Heritage Area is a federal boundary voted on by Congress that creates a federal land management plan for everything within inside that boundary. And as Norman always points out, you end up with boards who are not elected, not accountable to anybody, coming in, making land use decisions on your property without your knowledge. All you know is the things that you could do a couple years ago is getting harder to do, more expensive to do, and you're looking at wanting to move. It's just too tough. So we started fighting back a National Heritage Area that was going in Upper Kansas and southern Nebraska. We went around and we started telling everybody that this National Heritage Area was going in. And we asked counties to pass resolutions, and that is my thing, that is my goal. So even though I'm giving you all kinds of bad news, I ask everybody to pass, I even ask RCAF to pass resolutions all the time, because what that does, to give you a big difference, if I were to walk into a courtroom and I want to take your letter that you wrote and use it as my testimony or my witness or to build my case, I have to get your permission. A resolution is public record. It doesn't require permission. I can take that into a court of law without consulting with you first. It does get the attention of state legislatures. They do work wonderful. So of that National Heritage Area, we asked 49 counties to pass a resolution. 45 of them did, and that National Heritage Area went away. We accidentally informed people when we were doing that of the National Heritage Area that's been there since 2006. And the number one phone call I got was, does this have anything to do with why we're starting to get zoning regulations? 7 of those counties now have passed resolutions wanting to get out of Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area. There are 64, 62 of these National Heritage Areas all over the country now. The entire state of Tennessee is a National Heritage Area. The director of all the National Heritage Areas in the country are saying now that 30 by 30 is there, now is a good time to make all of these a National Park Service unit. Imagine the entire state of Tennessee. These are bad. So I'm going to pull up some maps if I can. Do I just hit the clicker? Does it work? Nope, that's the laser. Clicker. There we go. Go back. So I'm going to put this all in perspective and how this came down to us. This map right here, you can find it. It's a government map. It's a GISD map. All that is not white is managed land and considered preserved by the federal government. Yellow there is BLM land. Green is Forest Service land. Remember, 30 by 30 wants 30% of the United States. Right? So how does this tie into the banning of barbed wire fences, right? I'm going to get to that in just a second. So looking at that, you would say that 30% is already preserved. This one is of perpetual conservation easements. What perpetual conservation easements does is make you a tenant on your own property. The idea is to stop development. Well, when they stop development, they stop technology. And when they stop technology, your workers tend to move away to where technology is. Conservation easements works hand in hand with trying to grab up more land by stopping growth. These last 2 maps, this one and the one before, interactive maps, you can actually scroll all the way down into your neighborhood if you jump online and find them. So these are conservation easements. Now in a CRP. So in perspective, every green dot is 1,000 acres in CRP. And there are so many green dots of 1,000 acres that it looks like it gobbles up entire states. So if you were to add all of these 3 maps on top of each other, I would argue that 85% of the United States is already in some kind of a conservation program. So if you're failing at conservation, is it because of you or is it because of the government program that you're enrolled in? So I'm not sure that there's too many of us that aren't enrolled in some kind of a program. So what we're finding is that when you take all of these maps into consideration, particularly this one, what we're finding is that they are closing up access to federal lands. They are shrinking down those hiking trails, eliminating those campsites, those places that we all loved to take our kids when they were little. They're closing them up. And then they're creating recreation on the front end through national heritage areas, through national trails, and other types of programs, because we have to keep our recreation. In the meantime, they're zoning and regulating you out, talking you into perpetual conservation easements, and slowly just moving you into the city. So we're calling that regulatory takings. If you look that up in a dictionary or any federal court case, the actual term for that is called regulatory takings, where they're literally regulating you off your land without you even knowing about it. So 30 by 30 to me is not locking up 30% of the United States by the year 2030. 30 to me is a confession by an administration for the first time in our nation's history to coveting land. It's probably Buffalo Commons. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Buffalo Commons. So a lot of you are. So the idea of Buffalo Commons is to preserve all of the Plain States and return it back to Buffalo and make it a great big huge national park. That fits in line really well with the federal economic plans that I found that I wasn't smart enough to print off before it got pulled off all the websites. The federal economic plans for the national level is to take all that land between the two mountain ranges and change the economy. They want to eliminate agriculture because naturally it's ruining the environment. They also want to eliminate industry. The argument is that industry creates too many high-paying jobs, and when you lose that plant, they use Flint, Michigan as an example. When you lose that plant, you have too many people that are now desolate. So the idea is to not have industry at all, and we'll all be better off for it. So eliminate agriculture and industry and replace it with tourism and energy production. Apparently, we all are going to want to come out here and watch the buffalo range in between the solar panels and wind farms. So that brings us to what we did last week. Last week, we attended a program in Chase County, Kansas, right next to us in Lyon County. Now remember, to put this in perspective, Lyon County is right next door, so right directly east of Chase County, straight south of, or southeast really, of Fort Riley, Kansas. So Fort Riley is in the Flint Hills, kind of up in the northern part. Chase County is kind of down in the southern end, and we're right next door to it. Chase County has Tallgrass National Prairie Preserve. Fort Riley, College in Manhattan, also has a great big huge prairie preserve. So just last week, we went over to Chase County to Mush Rush Ranch, which is right next door to and leases land from Tallgrass National Prairie and Nature Conservancy. Do you know what the program was? It was on virtual fencing. So they want to put collars on cows, shock collars like you see in dogs, right? And through AM radio, you can buy these towers. They said roughly about $12,000 a tower. Takes 2 to 3 to set up in a county to run the entire county. Your cows will wear shock collars, and this will keep them in specific areas or out of specific areas. Now, the shock collars only last about 6 months, and in their experiment, only about a third of the cows ended up with the shock collars by the end of the 6 months. And they did talk about they had to train the cows to the shock collars. They gave a demonstration. The cows were very well trained, right? And they were the first one to tell you that, no, this has nothing to do with eliminating all fencing. You know, this is only for inside, and you want to keep your perimeter fencing. The thing that I was thinking about is that federal buffalo herd on Tallgrass National Prairie that is adjacent to this ranch, right? So we all know how this is going. I don't need to explain this to you. That buffalo's they're gonna eventually, because they did say, you know, when you get into this and everybody gets set up, then all of your neighbors can use the same cell towers, so you can get rid of all the fences, right? Be wonderful for the buffalo. But I'm sure it's just a coincidence and has absolutely nothing to do with the attempt to ban barbed wire fences in the county next door. So that was just last week that we went to this and got this demonstration. Now I'm thinking that this cannot possibly work. The amount of money it takes, and you're going to spend more time running those cattle through the chutes and putting them in their collars than anything else. But I was also thinking about PETA. For once, PETA became my ally. Can you imagine their reaction to shock collars on cattle? I don't even like them on dogs, right? So maybe PETA has its useful purpose after all. So it's coming. They are working in that direction. Economic development is going into your counties, and they are asking your counties to, I mean, it starts very, very incrementally. I'm going to use trails as a good example. So in 2015, Congress passed a funding for what they called back then MAP 21. It's now called Safe Passages to Schools. So what they're doing is coming into your county and they're saying, hey, You know, you need to upgrade the corners in your sidewalks so you have disability and wheelchair access, and we have some grant money that can help you with that. And you're like, sure. You want to do that, right? You want to be able to make sure that everybody can use and get to the buildings there in town. So your county commissioners are talked into it, and so is the city. Well, now that that's done, they come back and say, oh, hey, did you read the fine print? Because in that, it says that, that we can go ahead and do a study on public use trails that might be from the school to wherever, and it's going to be underneath the power line. And then it just grows from there. Once they got you locked into an interlocal agreement or into a contract, then they simply push and push and push and push until they get that further expansion. So economic development is probably already in your counties back home trying to push these ideas. And what I tell county commissioners is they are the gatekeepers. They are the gatekeepers. So when you go home and you talk to your county commissioners, and I do want you to do that, I really, really do. These folks are just like us. You know, they're not from Washington, D.C., and they are up against the most professional con artists I've ever seen. These guys have been training since the 1960s and 70s on how to implement these programs into our local areas. And our county commissioners are normal people like us. They don't stand a chance. They have to hear from you, and they have to do so respectfully. It's not their fault. If I didn't know what I know, I'd probably fall for the scam too. I mean, think about it. My own county, 3 commissioners, all 3 of them had farms. There was no except for county commissioners in any of these comprehensive plans and zoning regulations. They had no idea what they were bringing on to their own county. Not a clue. So it's important that all of you let all of those local officials know to keep an eye out for and to watch for these things, to pass a resolution if you can. So resolutions for us in the state of Kansas got us a hearing in December of 2021. They haven't done anything yet, and I'm still collecting resolutions to try to compel them to take some action. There are some things that they can do. Did you know the state of Nebraska has laws on conservation easements, allowing the county to say no to any more conservation easements that are coming into their county? Did you know a county can condemn property with a conservation easement on it? So there are things that they can do and tools that they have that they don't know about. National heritage areas and national trails. Granted, these are voted on by Congress and administered by Congress, but in order for them to get any money, they have to get matching funds first and before the federal government kicks in. Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area in Kansas, more than, I think it's 47% of their funding comes from state agencies. So if Kansas were to pass a law on national heritage areas and national trails that say the legislature gets to vote, and any vote that fails gets no money, that would help dry them up and keep them powerless. They're not going to have too many employees to be able to get in front of those county commissioners. So there are things to do. I'm going to close this up and end this because I don't want to get too long. But I am going to be over here at this table, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. I know I just hit you with a large fire hose. More importantly, I want you to pick up these sheets right here. These sheets have definitions in them for language that was in our comprehensive plan. These are important because they are recognized, the definitions in there are recognized by the federal courts. So if you let that sit in your comprehensive plan for too long, you lose standing to be able to fight any of this stuff back in a court of law. So you want to fight those back. And then they have on the picture on the back, they have a picture of the national heritage areas that were affecting us in Kansas and Nebraska, and a picture of one of the sets of trails that is before Congress for legislation now. These become leverage, so even though these laws that go in that say they're wonderful, we're going to protect private property, the minute they become law, they become leverage, and the same environmental groups get in front of Congress and start pleading for the ability to eminent domain. Appalachian Trail on the East Coast is a good example. More than 400 properties so far have been eminent domain for that trail. So I want you to come back there and pick this up. I also want you to pick up American Stewards of Liberty's pamphlet on 30 by 30 that gives you a little bit more information and gives you some direction on how to fight that back. So we'll be back right there at that table after today and in the breaks. Thank you, Shad.